Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Talks in Class. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the pod. I'm Jenna, so excited to be here with you today. I hope everybody's had a nice couple of weeks, and I hope if you're here in the US, you had a nice Memorial Day weekend. I always get so excited when Memorial Day weekend comes because I don't know if this is actually a mindset that exists in the entire US or if it's just a East Coast mentality that I have carried over, even though I no longer live there. But Memorial Day weekend indicates the beginning of summer. I know it technically isn't the beginning of summer. The first day of summer isn't for a couple weeks still, but unofficially, Memorial Day weekend is the kickoff of summer. And I feel like after Memorial Day weekend, my mindset completely shifts. People's behaviors, their moods, like everything shifts after Memorial Day. And I love summer. It is my favorite time of year. It's my favorite season, hands down. I do not subscribe to any of these ideas about summer being overrated or about it being not fun. Like, I love it, even though it is really busy. Like, I'm looking ahead at my schedule and there's a lot going on. I'm not denying that, especially I think when you do live in a place where you have to cram so much life into those 3 months of summer because the weather is only nice for those activities during those 3 months. It can be overwhelming. Like, I can't imagine what parents feel like in the summer because I'm just me and, my husband and my dog, and it's a lot. This summer, I have some fun things coming up. I feel like I've talked about this before, but I feel like I travel a lot, but I don't necessarily vacation a lot. A lot of the travel that I do is to go somewhere for a purpose, whether it's work or visiting family or, you travel for a wedding or something like that. It's rare that I go somewhere just to be there, just to hang out and chill. The closest, I guess, would be when we go to Palm Springs for the weekend, but even that doesn't feel quite like a true vacation because it's such a short trip. Anyway, the point is, my friend and I, my really good friend from college, we planned pretty much the laziest vacation that we could come up with. We both live in cities. She's in New York, I'm in LA. We didn't want to deal with the city, so we are going to a lake town and we are going to sit by the lake and do nothing. It's going to be a proper vacation and I'm so excited for that. So these are the types of things I look forward to in the summer. And before we get into this week's episode, I do just want to give a little update about the podcast schedule for the summer. Like I did last year, I will be going on a little summer vacation for the podcast. So we will have this episode and one more before I go on that little break. And this week is actually part one of a 2-part podcast episode. And I didn't intend this to be a 2-part episode, but it turns out I just had a whole lot to say about this topic. So this is part one of the life and careers of millennial icons Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen. I talk a lot about celebrities who influenced me throughout my life. Lindsay Lohan and The Parent Trap, Britney Spears, Paris and Nicole, obviously. And many of those people, when I think about it, were child stars, famous kids who influenced me when I was also a kid. And then some, like Lindsay Lohan, influenced me as a kid and continued to influence me into my teenage years and sometimes beyond. But we cannot even begin to talk about influential child stars, at least in the world of millennial age girls and women, without talking about the OG millennial child stars, Mary Kate and Ashley, obviously. On the surface, I think we all know how huge Mary Kate and Ashley's careers have been, of course, but I don't think at a glance, when we just think about Mary Kate and Ashley, we can really comprehend how massive their impact was, like how influential the Olsen twins were and have been throughout their entire careers, from TV, media, now into fashion. And really, this has been their entire lives because they weren't just child stars, they were infant stars. They were baby stars. They were 9 months old when Full House started. 9 months old. So they've been famous and influencing people like me since they were literally babies. And that means for those of us millennials, and especially those of us kind of in the middle of the millennial generation, like myself, who are around or almost their exact same age, we really grew up watching the Olsen twins, but it felt like we grew up with them as well, or at least it really did for me. Having watched them from such a young age on Full House, and then because their media was so pervasive throughout the 90s and the 2000s, I mean, they were everywhere if you were of the right age group in the 90s and 2000s. So at any point in my childhood years or my tween or teen years, if I wanted some fashion inspo, I knew that I could look to Mary Kate and Ashley. And I mentioned this in my episode about tween culture, but this was so important as a young girl growing up because the Olsen twins are my age. They were born in 1986. I was born in 1987. So, you know, they were right around my age. And I could look to them for age-appropriate inspiration, unlike some of my other favorite celebrities who I loved, you know, people like Britney Spears or Paris Hilton. They were a little bit older than me, and that matters when you're a tween. You know, when you're 12, 13, 14 years old, because now in my 30s, a 5 or 6 year age difference or whatever is nothing. Like, basically, if you're between the ages of 30 and, I don't know, 45, or maybe even a little older than that, I just lump all of that into generally my age now. But when you are 13 years old, it's hard to realistically take inspiration from an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old. That's more aspirational for sure than inspirational. And that's what celebrities like Britney Spears or Paris Hilton were to me. They were very aspirational, but because Mary Kate and Ashley were my age, they felt a little bit more like peers in the, you know, in the celebrity world at least. And obviously their style was still aspirational. I mean, I can't tell you how many looks of theirs I tried to copy, especially from Passport to Paris and Our Lips Are Sealed. And that was the age when I was like really awkward, so I failed. I failed so miserably at copying these styles. I will never forget when I chopped all of my hair off in 8th grade and tried to flip it out like they did in Our Lips Are Sealed. I think it was Mary Kate. She basically had a bob, but it was layered and it was flipped out. I tried to do that, except mine was just a little bit too short, and I think the layers were just not quite cut correctly. It just wouldn't, it wouldn't flip, so I had to wear it just kind of curled under, and it looked like a grown-out bowl cut for several months until I finally was able to get it to flip. But even if I couldn't replicate it quite right, their style always did feel a little bit more accessible to me because I could reasonably go find a crocheted head bandana like they wore in Passport to Paris, or some hibiscus print board shorts like they wore in Our Lips Are Sealed or Billboard Dad in the junior section at Kohl's or wherever I was shopping. And I just loved their style so much. They were very versatile in their style, which I liked. And from the time that I was a kid up until, I mean, really young adulthood, even into the time when everyone was criticizing them a lot for looking like dumpster divey, I still secretly kind of loved it. I was all in on that like NYU era, especially of Mary Kate with her beat up old Balenciaga city bag. Like, I loved all of it. But obviously their influence went far beyond the hairstyles and outfits that I tried to copy. They were legit media moguls. And when they were children, I mean, they were media moguls as actual children. The world first got to know Mary Kate and Ashley, obviously, as their character Michelle Tanner on Full House, which ran from 1987 to 1995. And the girls both played this singular character of Michelle because child labor laws really limit how much a kid can work, especially a baby on a TV set. So they often look for twins for children roles because they can use them interchangeably, which helps them, you know, basically get twice the work without violating these labor laws. And it's also helpful when you're working with really young kids to have essentially a double in case one of them is having a temper tantrum or in a bad mood or whatever. So this was a big deal to like find twins. And this is how the world got to know Mary Kate and Ashley. And Michelle Tanner, she was so cute. Everyone loved the character of Michelle. The Olsen twins were really kind of the breakout stars of Full House because they were so cute and lovable as Michelle. They really captured audiences' hearts on that show. And obviously it's such like a cheesy kind of heartwarming show anyway. And look, I've said it before, I will say it again, I will stand by it until the day I die. They are not good actors. They are actually like pretty bad actors. But when you're a toddler on a sitcom or a baby on a sitcom, that doesn't matter at all. You don't have to be a good actor. You just have to be cute and charming and say your little one-liners and smile at the camera. And they were great at that. They were so good at that. And thankfully for them, they exploded into absolute mega stardom before that cute factor wore off. So, they never really had to be good actors. They really didn't have to worry about that. They were icons by the time they were, 8 years old? So the girls started getting more and more work during the course of Full House's run, and they started putting out these TV movies like To Grandmother's House We Go, which I think was the first one that they did. And this is where the world got to see them as twins, as separate characters rather than as one singular character. And in 1993, their own production company, Dual Star, was created. Okay, 1993. And this is crazy when you really think about it because they were tiny children at this time. And they were famous. They were very well known for Full House. They had done To Grandmother's House We Go and maybe a couple of other small things at this time, but they weren't on some crazy level of fame where you would think it was reasonable for them to be starting their own production company. And a lot of people didn't necessarily think that they would have longevity in their careers at this point, but they had their own production company. And this was the work of their manager, who was an entertainment lawyer named Robert Thorne. He's the one who actually created Dual Star. So the girls' dad actually initially hired Robert Thorne to help with some contract negotiations on Full House. And he was so happy with the work that he did. He ended up hiring this man on to manage the girls' entire career. And what a move that was, because this is the man who really kind of laid the foundation for everything that they really built. He has been credited with building the empire that became Mary Kate and Ashley by creating Dual Star. They're not just celebrity. There's a few celebrities I think that are so far beyond celebrity. They are brands. They are an empire in themselves. And they were doing that from such a young age. So the Olsen twins' parents were really kind of clueless about show business. From all accounts, they weren't stage parents. They didn't push the girls into acting. They didn't come from that world or kind of have a background in it. Or Elizabeth, their younger sister, she has also said that she didn't feel pushed into acting. With the Olsen twins, it kind of happened accidentally. They took the girls to a casting for Full House because their mother had a friend whose child was an actor, and the friend's agent happened to see photos of Mary Kate and Ashley, and because twins are so useful, for lack of a better word, in a production, and they were very cute, he asked them to come in. So they did, and I don't think anybody could have ever imagined that they would reach the level of fame that they had from this. I'm sure the parents have gotten a lot of criticism for, putting their kids in show business as, I think that's warranted, but that's a different conversation about kids in show business. But at that point, they didn't have background. They weren't taking the girls to auditions, trying to get them on TV or anything. So the most they could have ever hoped for was for the girls to book the show, which they ultimately did. And Robert Thorne wanted to be able to negotiate better terms for the girls when they brought him on. He wanted more creative control. I'm sure he wanted more money because they were really the stars, right? They were being pitched these projects that were kind of built around them. And he tried to get them executive producer credits on an early movie that he was negotiating for them. And obviously, whoever it was, the company who was making the movie, said no. They didn't want to give executive producer roles to 6-year-old girls, which reasonable. So he created Dual Star, and they became the youngest executive producers ever at, I think, 7 years old. When it was created, Robert Thorne became the CEO of the company, and then their dad became the president of the company until the girls turned 18, at which point they did end up taking control of Dual Star. And at 7 years old, they became executive producers. And this also meant that all of their projects were being produced through Dual Star, through their very own company, which did give them a lot more control. It gave them a lot more leverage in things like negotiations, of course. It's also probably a big reason why you cannot find a lot of their stuff now. It's not available streaming. Some of it's not even available to buy. I mean, it's not being made anymore. You'd have to find used copies because this stuff isn't owned by companies like Disney or ABC or some other, company that's still actively producing media and wants to put it on their streaming service. All of their stuff pretty much is owned by Dual Star, so anybody who would want to put it on their streaming service would have to secure the rights from Dual Star to do that, which they obviously don't want to do that. So anyway, this was the start of the empire that was Mary Kate and Ashley. Dual Star immediately entered into production agreements with ABC and some other companies to create these series of media, including another TV movie, Double Double, Toil and Trouble. Like, these feel like such... this was such a long time ago. This was like 1993, 1994. And they also started to put out music, which I had completely forgotten. They actually put out a lot of music in their career, which, I had forgotten all about it. Around the time of To Grandmother's House We Go, they put out an album called Brother for Sale. Ugh. And then they released a second one, I Am the Cute One, a little bit later. And apparently these actually sold quite well, believe it or not, especially I Am the Cute One, which hit number 25 on the Billboard Kids music charts. That I did not know that existed, but apparently the Olsen twins were number 25. And it was also right around this time that Dual Star decided to create the Olsen twins fan club. And I don't know if I was ever actually a member of the fan club, but I remember seeing stuff about the fan club everywhere. And I just remember feeling like it was a really big deal. Like, it legitimately, to me, felt like an exclusive club. Like, if you're in the Mary Kate and Ashley fan club, they are personally sending things to you. And I remember a little bit later in the 90s, in the AOL days, you could type in the keyword Mary Kate and Ashley. Do you guys remember AOL keywords? This is so hard to explain to somebody who wasn't around during the AOL days because AOL kind of had its own existence on the internet. So AOL keywords were kind of like a Google search, but only within AOL, not like the wider World Wide Web. And it would bring you to the AOL Mary Kate and Ashley homepage. I always remember seeing stuff on there about their fan club. And all of this, by the way, was happening while the girls were like 6, 7, 8 years old. I mean, they're still tiny children, and it was an absolute explosion of projects, work, fame, and expansion of their brand into other media. And 7 years old is so young. At 7 years old, I don't even know, playing Barbie dolls and watching Rugrats on Nickelodeon and like begging my parents to buy me an American Girl doll. I hadn't even learned my timetables yet. I didn't even know how to write in cursive yet. And Mary Kate and Ashley were executive producers on Double Double Toil and Trouble and recording their second album. I don't think any normal person can really fathom anywhere near the life that these girls have had. They were really working endlessly from the time they were 9 months old. They had zero normalcy in their entire lives. None. And despite a lot of media being, I don't know, it's kind of cringe looking back, but they were really popular. They were very, very, very popular amongst young girls. Their kids' album was so popular that they were offered a multi-album record deal in 1994, which led to Dual Star forming Dual Star Records and Dual Star Videos so that they could produce these albums and corresponding music videos that then would be distributed by this record label that was giving them this multi-album deal. Can you imagine having a multi-album record deal at 8 years old? 8 years old. And these were all multi-million-dollar deals, you guys. How the West Was Fun was $1 million deal. The record deal was somewhere between $5 and $7 million. And it's funny to me because when I think of the Olsen twins, this era isn't even really what I think of as their peak. Like, I personally wasn't even really invested in them by this point. But this was also the time period of the mystery themed series, The Adventures of Mary Kate and Ashley, which I honestly, I'm not sure if I've ever seen a single one of them. I'm really sorry. Please do not revoke my Olsen twins official fan club membership for this. I might have, and I would recognize the titles, but they were direct to video. I know I didn't own them. I just don't know where I would have seen them. I'm not really sure, but The Adventures of Mystery series was part of the record contract, actually, because they also released a companion album along with it called Give Us a Mystery. So these girls were everywhere at this time. And watching the musical, like clips of the musical stuff that they did back then, I've seen some of them circulate on social media recently. Honestly, it's almost physically painful to me. I fully understand why it's not available anywhere now. If I were them, I would try my best to wipe that from existence too. I mean, it's not like they need the money to stream it or whatever. Like, I would want to pretend that none of that ever existed. And because all of this was going through Dual Star, and Robert Thorne clearly knew how to negotiate, there were a ton of different tie-in deals around this time, and just the Olsen twins were suddenly everywhere. Everywhere you looked, they were there. They hosted an AOL press conference. They made appearances at a theme park in Vegas. They did a meet and greet at SeaWorld. And keep in mind, too, that this was all happening during Full House. Full House was still in production. They were doing all of this Adventures of and You're Invited series work in addition to filming Full House. And the girls have been famously extremely private, especially after they turned 18 and have become adults. I mean, you really rarely, very rarely see them anymore. Maybe a Met Gala appearance, but I'm not even sure if they've been at the Met Gala the past few years. I don't really keep up with it. I mean, really, since they turned 18 and they went to college, they've dropped off the map. And it seems like as soon as they were able to take full control of their careers, they made the choices to do much, much less press, public appearances, any of that. But the little that we have heard from them over the years through interviews and different, press things about their experiences as child stars has been, I don't know, not overwhelmingly negative in the way that a lot of other child stars have, like in the grand scheme of child stardom, where the bar, by the way, is very, very low. They seem to have at least better people around them. Like their parents, unlike many other child star parents, didn't seem to be the typical stage parents. They weren't like pushing their kids to do it. But it is very clear, I think, that the girls never really enjoyed fame. I don't see them as people who... There are people who are great at being famous. The Kardashians I always use as an example. They are great at being famous. Paris Hilton is probably the best who's ever done it. Amazing at being famous. And the girls just don't seem like that. They seem like the direct opposite. They don't seem to enjoy it. Even though they themselves have said that their parents did not push them into it, they did not feel pressure to act. I think that clearly pressure exists anyway, just by nature of being the kids in a situation like that. Like as children, very young children, when they started to see this massive success at the hands of their parents and Robert Thorne and these things that were going around them that they didn't really have any control in, I can imagine even if they hated it, even if they just never wanted to do it again, and even if their parents were saying to them, you don't have to do this, I would think it would be extremely difficult for two kids experiencing all of this success and probably a lot of people around them congratulating and saying, oh, this is so great. I would imagine it would be really hard to tell those adults, I don't want to do this anymore. And once Dual Star was established, you're talking about a lot of other people being affected. Think about how many jobs. So they can say that they didn't feel pressured, but that pressure is there regardless. And I just don't think that most people would have an easy time walking away from that, regardless of how they felt. And I remember at the time, even into their teen years, but certainly when they were kids, like 9, 10, 11, kind of that tween time, all the media conversation around them was so positive. You know, they just really wanted to paint them as these normal girls, all American, always smiling, happy, just like so innocent and sweet. I remember seeing something on the Fox Family Channel, which aired a lot of their stuff, that said that Mary Kate and Ashley get allowance for taking out the trash and cleaning their rooms, and it was something like $5. The media wanted us to see them in that way. They wanted us to see them as very normal girls next door, like they could be your best friend, because that's what they were selling, of course, was that image. But now, watching back some of that earlier stuff, I don't know, it doesn't seem like they were always in it. And how could you be when you're working so hard? How could you put all your effort into something when you're stretched so thin, especially as a child? Maybe that's partially their acting, because it's not great, obviously, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem like they're super present and excited about some of the things that they did when you watch it now. And then later, certainly as they got older, we started to see those cracks a lot more in interviews and stuff like that. They would make comments and say that they wished that they would have had normal childhoods. Of course. I mean, who wouldn't? And obviously it just kept getting worse and worse and more clear as they got older. But compared to, I think, the vast majority of child stars, they did seem to have more control, at least. The company of Dual Star was set up in a way to protect them and also people involved in Dual Star from the industry, at least in some ways, you know, financially, creatively, I'm sure they had more control. And the fact that it was done this way and they had Dual Star probably did have a big hand in allowing them to step away from acting once they turned 18 and took control, and then pivot into things that they actually wanted to be doing, because it wasn't acting, clearly. After Full House wrapped in 1995 is really when Mary Kate and Ashley skyrocketed, or at least that's my perception. Maybe that is just my perception, because my full-blown obsession with the Olsen twins started when I saw It Takes Two in 1995. Oh my God, I loved that movie so much. I did a whole episode on It Takes Two and The Parent Trap last summer because they're pretty similar in plot. Two girls who look identical happen to meet by chance and then try to set up their parents/caretakers. But they're also similar in that they gave me my most iconic millennial celebrities, Mary Kate and Ashley and Lindsay Lohan. I mean, talk about millennial icons right there. It Takes Two was different from anything that Mary Kate and Ashley had done so far because it was also a theatrical release. And I think I said this in my podcast last summer about the movie, but compared to their other movies, even ones I loved, like Billboard Dad, Passport to Paris, like I loved them, but It Takes Two is a real movie. You know what I mean? It feels like a real movie. It had celebrities in it. It was a real movie. And it did go to theaters. It didn't do great at the box office, but home video sales were very, very high. And I do have to say, not one, but two of those home video sales were to my family. I don't have a clue why, but we have 2 copies of It Takes Two on VHS. Literally still to this day, we own 2 copies of that movie. So you're welcome, Dual Star, Olsen twins, whoever, for the 2 copies that my family purchased of that movie. And again, some people kind of thought that once Full House ended, so would the Olsen twins mania. They were just so synonymous with Michelle Tanner still at that time because Full House was a really popular show. And a lot of stars, child stars especially, but a lot of stars do have a really hard time kind of breaking out of the mold of whatever character kind of made them famous. But they did It Takes Two, and they kept doing the Adventures of series and the You're Invited To series. And I think a lot of those projects, like these series kind of projects, flew under people's radars a bit, which is why they thought that they would disappear, because all this stuff was direct to video. Like the vast, vast majority of the stuff that they made was all direct to video or, you know, the kids' albums. And they were all produced by Dual Star. So unless you were really closely following Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen's careers, or you happen to have a kid or be a kid around that age, it would have been really easy to dismiss them as nothing more than Michelle Tanner. But obviously that was not the case, as we well know, especially now looking back. Around this time, they were flying all over the place filming these episodes for the Adventures of series. These were happening in all sorts of different locations depending on the story that was being portrayed in the episode. And those videos were wildly popular. They also negotiated a new contract for their home video releases through Warner Vision, which apparently was a very good renegotiation on the part of Robert Thorne that got them a lot more money. And they signed a book deal for 14 books based on little stories kind of revolving around the girls and their interests. So they would say, you know, Mary Kate likes riding horses, so they do a little horse riding story, or Ashley likes ballet, so they do a little ballet story, and these were little books. They were just pumping out stuff. I mean, everything that you could imagine. They were just pumping it out. And in 1997, it was reported that their Adventures of and You're Invited To series, again, direct to video, had made $77 million. In 1997, the girls were what? They were 11. They were 11 years old in 1997. And that was just one of their many, many, many projects. I mean, that doesn't even include Full House. $77 million. Around 1998, when the girls entered into my personal favorite, well, maybe one of my favorite eras of the Olsen twins timeline, the tween years, they filmed Two of a Kind, the TV show, which was actually negotiated way back in 1993 as a 13-episode TV show that was to be filmed once Full House ended. So this was already like ready to go. This was negotiated and greenlit before Full House was even canceled, that once Full House was over, there was going to be this additional show focused on the Olsen twins, you know, different story, different characters that they were going to do. And that became Two of a Kind. And they also in 1988 made Billboard Dad. So these were both released in 1998. What an iconic year for Mary Kate and Ashley, because these were two of my favorite things that the Olsen twins came out with. Two of a Kind and Billboard Dad. I loved them both. Neither got great reviews, which is it's a theme for their projects, you know, minus Full House. Nothing really got great reviews, but sales were high. That's the thing with the Olsen twins. Sales were high because little girls loved it, regardless of critics who were adults, obviously. I mean, they're not going to get it. It's not for them. And yeah, they were kind of bad actors. That's always mentioned in the critiques. And of course, the writing on their shows and movies is really, really cheesy. I mean, it is for kids, but even then, it's cheesy. But a 10-year-old girl does not care if Mary Kate and Ashley were literally the worst actors on the face of the planet. I didn't care, not even in the slightest. I cared that they taught me how to scramble eggs in a Ziploc bag and wore the coolest hibiscus print board shorts I had ever seen and made up stupid slang that I thought sounded really cool because I was in middle school. Like, she was totally edging on my squeeze. So I dinged her with the bounce bounce in the numbers lab. Like, if they were looking for a cinematic experience, an Olsen twins movie is not the place to look, but they were selling, okay? Girls were eating this up. The plot of Billboard Dad, let's remind you, is literally that two 12-year-old girls somehow went from Venice Beach to West Hollywood in the middle of the night, alone, and put a billboard up over the Sunset Strip to get their dad dates. So, I mean, I get it. Not great quality, but teen girls, they were eating it up. And this led to another kind of level up, another explosion, certainly, in the Mary Kate and Ashley empire leading into their teen years, which is what I'll get into more in part 2 of this little Olsen twin series next time. But by the end of the 90s, the girls had made a fortune. Okay, they weren't even teenagers yet. They had made a fortune and literally built an empire. By the early 2000s, Dual Star was reportedly generating $1 billion, with a B, dollars per year. Okay, this is 25 years ago. But the thing with child stars, almost always, especially female child stars, is that they really struggle with the transition from child to adult in the public eye. And looking back, I mean, you can see this so clearly with the Olsen twins, especially because so much of their brand and their image was built around this idea of them being very wholesome. If you look at Billboard Dad in 1998 to even Passport to Paris in 1999, where they had the little love story and the kisses with the boys at the end, but certainly then to Holiday in the Sun, which was 2001, I think. They're in bikinis on the beach. They're wearing tube tops, They were becoming teenagers and they were showing that in what they were wearing, the storylines that they were showing in their media. And to me, they were icons. I still loved them in my teens. I had no, obviously, issue with their transitioning from kid to teenager because I was also transitioning from kid to teenager, but the media certainly had other opinions, which I will get into quite a bit in part 2. But to wrap up this part, I am going to end with a list, and this is my top 5 favorite Mary Kate and Ashley movie moments from the 90s and early 2000s. Number 5 is when I think Mary Kate, I'm actually not 100% sure which one it is. I think it's Mary Kate as Amanda in It Takes Two eats snails at a fancy party. She is unaware that escargot means snails, and when she finds out, she spits it out and then drops it into the champagne glass of the evil stepmother-to-be. Iconic. Number 4 is in Holiday in the Sun when one of the girls, I think Mary Kate, goes on a date with a guy who is very nervous about this date, so he decides to wear a little earpiece, like some sort of Secret Service agent, so that the other twin, I think Ashley, can feed him talking points during the date so he can relate to her. And not only is this absurd, like this is a crazy idea, who would do this, but Mary Kate, or whoever's on the date, does not notice at all that this boy is wearing an earpiece and clearly being fed information from the earpiece, and she just thinks he's kind of an idiot, which he kind of was. Number 3 is just all of the slang that they use in Passport to Paris. That class is so S&C, snooze and cruise, and that's honestly the tamest of the examples. They say some really crazy shit in that movie, but I, at 12 years old, thought that this slang was it, okay? I was fully on board with trying to make dinged her with a bounce bounce in the numbers lab happen, okay? But turns out we did not make bounce bounce in the numbers lab happen. Number 2, this is niche, this is a deep cut, but when they make a very, very dated Y2K era MCI joke in Our Lips Are Sealed, you have to be old to get this one, so I'm sorry if any of you are just like, what are you talking about? But there's this scene in Our Lips Are Sealed where they're talking to the person in charge of placing them in the witness protection program, and he's explaining to them how it works, and he says, nobody will know your whereabouts, not even your friends and family. And one of them, I think Mary Kate again, makes a joke and says, the whole MCI network? If you don't get this, that's totally fair. It's a reference to a program that the MCI phone company, do you remember MCI phone company, had where people could select certain people to be in their friends and family circle, and they would get discounted calls between them. This was back when you actually had to pay like for long distance calling, or you'd have to pay per minute for certain types of calling. So this was a popular program, and this dated ass reference somehow made it into this movie, To Live for All Eternity. And number 1, my favorite thing, just my favorite thing in the entire Mary Kate and Ashley cinematic universe is just the actual billboard in Billboard Dad. Never mind the premise behind the billboard and how it got there and everything that happened after, but I'm talking about the actual billboard. It said, he's single, he's handsome, he's cool to the max. Interested? Write to Max Tyler at 10 Surf Street, Venice. I mean, are you kidding me? Nobody let these girls write their Hinge profiles, okay? Like, you are just inviting stalkers, all the stalkers. They really put their whole address on a billboard above Sunset Boulevard. If I saw that billboard, if I was driving, I would drive off the road because I would not be able to believe what I was reading. But in a kid's movie, 10 out of 10, excellent job, girls. And obviously, they succeeded in getting their father a lot of dates. We will continue this conversation about the Olsen twins on the next episode. So until then, thank you as always for tuning into the podcast. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye!